What are some true scary experiences that you Redditors have been through? Creepy strangers, unexplainable incidents, narrow misses, etc. When I was about 12, I had a lot of issues with night terrors, and rarely slept a whole night through. One night, I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I sat down, half asleep and thinking of nothing but emptying my bladder and going back to bed when I see movement out of the corner of my eye. There was a man standing by the other door to the bathroom staring at me, not moving. He was wearing a tattered grey jumpsuit and had a crutch, little to no hair. I don't remember how I got down into the basement where my parents slept, but suddenly there I was, hysterical. My dad finally went up and looked in the bathroom and kitchen. Saw nothing but allowed me to sleep on the couch down there anyway. I didn't fall back asleep. About an hour or so later, I heard the sliding door to the bathroom from my sister's room and limping footsteps. The next morning my dad searched around and noticed that the fridge and pantry had been raided. Never caught the guy. Okay, I got contacts around the time I turned 21, and I had a real phobia of putting things in my eyes. If you live in the US, you know that they won't let you leave the ophthalmologist with your first pair of contacts unless you can put them in at least one time. It took me having to come back 3 days in a row, before I could get it right. That's how disturbed I was about it, but I was determined to have contacts. Anyways, I was real careful about rubbing my eyes with them in, because I had this paranoid fear that I would grind them into my eyes. I know. Like I said, I had a real phobia. So, I go to take a bath, and I'm real careful about getting soap in my eyes. Finally, I wash my hair and close my eyes as I douse water on my head. I rub my eyes and open them, and I realize I'm blind. I can see absolutely nothing. I was in a state of sheer terror. I got incredibly still, and all the possibilities were going through my head. How was I going to get out of the bathtub without help? Was this permanent? How was I going to live my life blind? Then the lights came back on. In the 5 seconds when I had closed my eyes, the power had gone off, and since the bathroom had no window, I'd been in pitch darkness. Too long didn't read. I briefly thought I had gone blind, but it was just a power outage. Not me but my mother. My mother was very pretty but shy when she was young. She was severely overprotected by her parents, and this caused her to decline date offers since she didn't want to deal with the arguments that would ensue with her father. It didn't help that her junior year, when she finally got the balls to say yes to a date, he ended up dodging a dog and rolled his car into a ditch on his way to pick my mother up. He died. 8 months later her date ran a stop sign and plowed his motorcycle head-on into a semi. He died. Her senior prom date hydroplaned at a stoplight and crashed into an office building on the way to pick her up. He died. She didn't date again until she met my dad 6 years later. When he didn't die, she married him. It'll be 31 years in August. Edit, a little background. My mom grew up in a very small town of about 2,000 in Indiana. It was quite common for accidents to take place considering the roads weren't well lit and were very windy and unkept. It was the early 70s. There were a lot of auto-related deaths in her town, especially people in their teens. It just so happened that 3 of those individuals were scheduled for a date with her on the nights they died. She has 2 older sisters who have also had plenty of issues when it comes to relationships. One aunt's ex-husband killed himself and the other has been married 3 times, second husband was a pedophile. I'm happy to report that my father is in good health and has been for the last 31 years. Smile. None of my dates have died, nor have any of my sisters, so the curse wasn't handed down. I once found myself in a cave, along with 8 or 9 other people. It was the middle of the Pennsylvania wilderness, and the only entrance was a small hole in the ground. To enter, you had to sit on your ass, grab a tree root, and drop about 7 feet down a steep wall to the floor. We all dropped in, and spent at least half an hour exploring this cave. My friend Dan taps me on the shoulder and whispers, "Dude, look at the ceiling." The ceiling was just high enough above our heads to hide the thousands of spiders crawling around on it. We tried to keep quiet about it, because we didn't want anyone to flip out, but there was no stopping it. Just seconds later the whole group noticed them. Everyone got silent, and you could actually hear the spiders crawling on the surface of the stone. It was an extra nerve-wracking situation. Because the only way to exit the cave was to basically jump up and pull yourself out of a hole surrounded by spiders. Two of the girls with us were terrified, and refused to climb out. They just couldn't muster the courage to put their faces next to a giant spider nests. They came around though, and everyone got out safe. I had the honor of being the last one to exit. Alone in a dark cave filled with spiders, and nobody around to give me a boost. Fortunately, Dan was brave enough to reach down in and give me a hand. When we first discovered the cave, we were all like, I can't believe we've never heard of this place. Now I know why. That cave sucks. A few months later, I found out the cave is off limits in the fall. Because of the rattlesnakes. Fuck that cave. Well, my sister ran away when she was 4 once. Our whole family checked the house for 45 minutes and still no sign of her. That's when we called the police. Our neighbors were checking around the woods near our house, too. I had no idea what happened to her. It turns out she was hiding under the side table in my parents' bedroom. It had a happy ending, but I was nervous and protective of my family for a while after that. Too long didn't read, Eagle stole little sister from my mother's hands. Not me but a friend of mine, female, about 22 at the time, worked for Google Maps as some sort of surveyor or photographer. Google sends her and another female coworker to some remote location in Mexico for a few days for business. The hotel they were staying at was apparently nice enough, but literally outside the walls of the hotel was a really rough ghetto with people living in boxes lining the streets. Anyway, the first day of the trip she and her co-worker are taking a taxi to the location they have to survey, and at a red light, some crazy guy opens the door, tries to pull my friend out and then starts stabbing her in the chest with a knife. The cab driver pulled away but not before she'd been stabbed 6 times. She survived but has pretty bad scars and has become a much different and quieter person since. I used to work graveyards at a Circle K in a northern CA college town. CA law states that no alcohol can be sold between 2 to 6 a.m. At about 2:45 a.m., a couple of guys come into the store, go to the cooler to grab a couple of 18 packs of shit beer, Coors, Keystone, can't remember now. I tell the leader of the duo that it's after 2, I can't sell the beer to him. As he starts getting irate, I offer him a free coffee, soda, candy bar, but I can't sell the beer. Cops and management had been all over our asses for questionable sales. The leader gets the 1,000-yard stare in his eyes and proceeds to start reaching for the small of his back, at which point his buddy says, "Stop, man. It's not worth it." The leader smiled at me and winked and said "see you soon," and left. 2 days later I got fired for telling the regional dickhead that 2 people needed to be on at night and a few other things, so my assistant manager had to cover my shift. That night he was robbed and had the shit knocked out of him by a guy that fit the description of the tool I dealt with a few nights before. Too long didn't read, narrowly avoided getting a shotgun shoved in my face, but a friend wound up with it instead. I was 16 and walking home from work late at night when a guy pulled up beside me and started asking, "Do you live around here? Where are your parents?" His questions got more personal. He asked me what school I went to, where I worked, etc. Then out of nowhere he says, "You're a really brave girl for being out alone this late. You know I'd really like to fuck you." I was scared shitless and didn't know what to do. Then he said, "I'll be right back," and drove off. Once he left I started bolting the rest of the way home, thinking he'd come back and rape and kill me if I didn't make it home quickly enough. He swerved back a few minutes later and saw me running, pulled up closer to me and began screaming for me to get in his car. I just kept running as he trailed me, and I ended up hurrying into a 24-hour store and calling my dad for a lift, who was just really annoyed I'd woken him up and didn't care at all about what was happening. Later on I felt stupid for disclosing so much personal info to a stranger, and I now realize he only trying to gauge my vulnerability. I was terrified he'd track me down for a bit, but I never saw him again, I think. Many years ago some friends and I walked out to the end of a stone break wall on Lake Erie in a thick fog. Suddenly we heard a groaning and creaking, and out of the fog emerges a fucking house. 3 stories tall. Peeling paint, hovering on the water. Needless to say we ran like hell. 2 days later we learned the house was being moved by barge to a new location nearby. I did not know you could float a 3-story Victorian. During finals week at college I left the library pretty close to midnight and decided to carry my laptop to my car, which was a block and a half away down a side street. I was completely alone and my phone was dead, but it was pretty well lit, so I figured I'd be okay. As I was walking, a pickup truck driving the opposite way slowed down and did a K-turn behind me and started following me. I immediately stopped, let it pass and stood by a lamp post until it made a turn down the street where my car was. I went back to the library and asked public safety to walk me to my car. As we got closer, the truck that had been following me was idle in the space directly behind my car and sped off down the street as soon as he saw me and the cop. I almost didn't go back and get public safety because I felt I was being too paranoid. Note, never be too paranoid. I was 16 years old. One Christmas vacation I hitchhiked from Chicago to Los Angeles, made it there in 57 hours, and back, took me 3 weeks. On the way back just outside Amarillo, Texas, I was out on the road about 10 p.m. It was very cold. A black Cadillac traveling westbound turned around, pulled up to me, and stopped. The passenger side window opened and the driver offered me a ride. We talked for a while and eventually the driver told me he was an entertainer. In his nightclub act he was known as the African Queen. As a relatively innocent 16-year-old, I didn't really appreciate what this meant. After traveling a short distance, the old, white African Queen propositioned me and asked me to spend the night with him. I declined. He persisted. He asked again and again. Finally he stopped the car. I tried to open the door, but there was no door handle on the door. I could not get out. He put his hand on my leg, smiled, and said he wanted to please me. I got pissed. I said, in no uncertain terms, if you don't let me out of this f***ing car, I'll break your neck. He replied, you don't have to get angry, opened the window. I reached outside the door, opened the door, got out, and he pulled away. I saw his black Cadillac take the next exit, cross over the highway, and continue back westbound. I'm one of 5 kids, and so growing up I shared a bed with my little sister. She had intense nightmares, that were probably worsened by the fact that when she woke up screaming, my preacher father would come in and pray over us so that the demons in the room leave this place. One night, I woke up because I felt someone staring at me. My sister was fast asleep with her eyes wide open and glaring at me, and this horrible expression. It freaked me out so bad that I shook her awake and she started shrieking get out over and over, with her hands clamped to her face like she didn't want to see anything. Mama and Daddy tried giving her a bath to calm her down. She was little, like 5, and baths helped sometimes, but when she wouldn't stop screaming, they took her to the ER. She was severely dehydrated, but the doctors never really figured out what was wrong with her. P.S. This wasn't the only crazy stuff. She used to shake me awake, wailing there's a snake in the bed. Or there's a spider on your face. And would be inconsolable for hours. Weird hallucinating 5-year-old girl, FTW. I live close to the woods and I regularly walk my dog there. I was walking back there one day and I heard this growling noise. I looked around expecting to see someone's dog that had gotten loose, but instead I saw a freaking wolf stalking my dog. Well, my dog is about the size of a kitten that is a few months old. I ran up to him, picked him up and ran as fast as I could towards the road. The wolf did chase us for quite some time, but as soon as we got to the road some cars came and scared away the wolf. I thought I was going to die along with my dog. I swear someone was looking after me that day. When I was about 6 years old, I went to this seedy carnival that was set up in a mall parking lot with my dad and my grandma. We were waiting online for the infamous pirate ship ride. My dad got off the line to get us drinks. Maybe about 5 minutes later a man grabs my hand and says, "Come on. This line's too long," and starts leading me away. I remember my grandma yelling after me, "Mel, that's not your father." I looked up and saw this man wearing a matching pair of faded denim jacket and jeans, cheap NASCAR sunglasses, and a firefighter's mustache. When he saw that my grandma was screaming, he let go of my hand and vanished into the crowd. We told these cops that were standing by their cars and they said they couldn't do anything. It actually bothered me for a very long time. I was down at the beach with my mother and my little brothers. I was about 16 at the time, and they were about 5 and 3. We decided to go to the pool, with some girl I had just met. My 5-year-old brother had to go to the bathroom, so I walked him into the bathroom. I decided to make sure the other didn't pee in the pool, so I turned around to get him. The girl I was with was busy laying in the sun with her iPod in. I looked around and couldn't find my brother. It was the scariest and most horrifying thing I've ever seen, to look into the pool and see him writhing at the bottom, while she just sat there. My blood turned ice cold and I ran over and looked down and saw his eyes staring back up at me. I dove in and got him. I am still to this day haunted by this in my nightmares. Needless to say, fuck that bitch. I used to go to the University of Arizona in Tucson. One night some friends and I decided to go to Agua Prieta, Mexico, which is across from Douglas, Arizona. Agua Prieta is a shithole of a town. I met some Mexican friends and a few girls we knew at this club. After the club was closed, most of our other friends left and I was standing outside talking to one of the girls from the club, and a bunch of other drunk Mexicans started yelling at me, calling me gringo, cabron, pendejo, the usual insults. I speak Spanish, so I knew what they were saying. They started walking towards me throwing beer bottles, and on the other side of the street, a few policemen with shotguns drawn started walking towards me as well. The situation did not look very good at all. Me against about 12 people, plus who the fuck knows what the police were going to do. I turned around and ran as fast as I could towards the border, with beer bottles whizzing past me and breaking near my feet. Luckily I got to the border without getting my ass kicked or hit by any bottles. By the time I got the US border guards saw the people and police following me and basically told me I was lucky to get out of there alive. I never went back down there. Fuck that. A few months later, a Mexican-American friend of ours was killed down there.
In this little shop of horrors, that's how we get down. Yeah, enter, the projects on the prairie, scary. Greet you at the gate with Bloody Marys. Blood, a rail full of blood. Back to the cemetery, get more blood. Standing on the grave, drinking blood, smoking bones. We seen a crew of ghouls running by with stolen tombstones. With Hell's Angels on the chase, they lust to bust a black skull. Want you embrace, they tie you up in chains and they stomp on your face. They go to purgatory and they beat the fucking case. I look around, mad bodies being